Let us start off today's class by briefly recapitulating what has already been done in the last two classes. So the main things that we learned in the last two classes are that in quantum mechanics the motion of a particle is described by a wave. This we learned in the in the two-slit experiment which we had done in the last class, what you have is a set of electrons being bombarded on a screen which has got two slits, and you observe a diffraction pattern on the screen over here. In order to explain this, you have to invoke the fact that the electron is actually described by a wave propagating from the left side, incident on the screen, and then you have secondary waves being emitted from the slits. The wave being emitted from slit A is psi A, and the wave being emitted from the slit B is psi B. By the time they reach the screen over here, the two different waves pick up different phases. The resultant wave on the screen is given by psi A plus B, which is equal to psi A plus psi B. Sometimes the phases add up, sometimes they subtract, and this gives you the interference pattern which you see on the screen. So we had to invoke two properties for the electron. One is that it is a wave. The second property is that you can superpose these waves. So there is one wave corresponding to the secondary wave coming out of slit A. There is another wave corresponding to the secondary wave coming out from slit B, and you can superpose these to obtain the resultant wave and on the screen. So these are the two salient points I would like you to note before we go on with today's lectures. Now, given the fact that an electron, the motion of an electron is described by a wave, we want to now construct a wave which will describe an electron moving along the x-axis. So we have an electron moving along one direction, which is the x-axis. An electron cannot move in the y and z direction. This is a simplification we make, and later on we can drop this simplification. So a wave traveling along the x-axis is described by psi xt, which is equal to some coefficient a into e to the power minus I kx minus omega t. So this corresponds to a wave propagating along the x-axis. This is the x-axis, and it is propagating in this direction. K is the wave vector, which is 2 pi by the wavelength, and omega is the angular frequency of the wave. Now in earlier lectures, particularly in the photoelectric effect, we had seen that for the electromagnetic wave, you had to describe it as particles with energy E is equal to h cross omega. This was what Einstein had proposed in order to explain the photoelectric effect, that the electromagnetic wave actually arrives as a form of packets or photons, each with energy E is equal to h cross omega. In addition, to explain the Compton effect, we had to attribute a momentum P is equal to h cross k, where k is the wave vector, to each of these particles. So using this, we can relate the classical properties of the particle. So we have an electron, it has some classical properties, and the ones which are pertinent here are the energy and the momentum. So using this, we can relate the energy and the momentum of the electron to the properties of the wave, which describes the motion of the electron. So we can relate the energy of the electron to the frequency of the wave, and we can relate the momentum of the electron to the wave vector or the wavelength of the wave. So this wave describes an electron with a known energy and momentum, and it has got a fixed wave vector and a frequency. Now we know that for a classical electron, the energy and the momentum are related in this fashion: E is equal to p squared by 2m. This also implies a relation for the angular frequency and the wave vector, the wave number k, and this is the relation implied by the relation between the energy and the momentum. Simplifying this a little further, we get the dispersion relation, which is basically a relation between the angular frequency and the wave number k. And this relation for a massive particle, for the electron, which is a massive particle, MP, massive particle, is omega is equal to h k square by 2m. Let me remind you, in case you have forgotten, what was the dispersion relation for an electromagnetic wave. For the electromagnetic wave, omega is equal to ck. It's a simple relation, linear relation between the angular frequency and the wave number, where c is the speed of light. So note the difference between the two different dispersion relations. What is the consequence of this difference between the dispersion relations? Let us calculate the group velocity and the phase velocity for these two waves. So this should be phase. This should be. So the phase velocity is defined as omega by k. So using these relations, we find that for the electromagnetic wave, the phase velocity is nothing but the speed of light, c. The group velocity is d omega by dk. For the electromagnetic wave, it is the same as the phase velocity. So both the group velocity and the phase velocity are the same for the electromagnetic wave. Now for the massive particle, if you calculate the phase velocity, so you have to just use this relation omega by k. What you get is k h cross by 2 omega, which is also p by 2m. Now this looks similar to the expression for the speed of the particle. We know that the particle has a momentum p, but it is not exactly the speed, it is half the speed of the particle. So the phase velocity actually differs from the speed of the particle. For the electromagnetic wave, c is the speed of the photon or the speed of the electromagnetic wave. But here the phase velocity for the massive particle comes out to be half the speed of the particle, whereas the group velocity, which is d omega by dk, comes out to be h cross k by m, which is the momentum by the mass. which is the velocity of the particle. So, notice the difference between the two situations. Here the group velocity is the velocity of the particle. Now let us go back to our original wave equation. This equation can also be written as psi x t is equal to a e to the power minus I by h cross p x minus e t. It is the same wave written directly in terms of the momentum and the energy. So, we can use either expression, both are equivalent. So, this describes a particle with momentum p and energy E, and it is a wave propagating along the x axis. Now, how do we physically interpret this wave? So, in the last class I had told you that the probability of finding the particle at any position, let us say at this point here, at this point x, is given by the probability of finding the particle at x was proportional to psi x t mod squared. The exact relation between the probability of finding the particle somewhere and the wave function is as follows. What does this relation tell us? dp, which is a function of x and t, is the probability of finding the particle in the interval dx. So, if this is the interval dx, dp into this is the probability of finding the particle in the interval dx located at the point x at the time t. And how do you calculate this probability? You take the wave function, find the mod of it, square it, and multiply it by the interval dx. This quantity, the mod of the wave function squared, is the probability density. The probability density into the interval dx gives you the probability of finding the particle in that interval. Now, let us calculate the probability density for this wave function. The probability density for this wave function, which is nothing but the mod of psi x t squared, is just a squared. Now, you see that we are in a difficulty. We precisely know that the particle has a momentum p and energy E. But if you ask the question, where is the particle located? At which point along the x-axis is the particle located? You find that you have no answer, because the particle has got equal probability of being everywhere along the x-axis. So, there is absolutely no spatial information about the particle. We have no information at all in this wave function about where the particle is located. but we have complete information about the momentum and the energy. So how do we go about and overcome this problem? In real life, we find that we sometimes have information about the momentum of the electron, sometimes about the position of the electron, sometimes we have some information about the momentum, some information about the position. So how do we construct a wave where we have some information about the position of the electron? So here we have to use the superposition principle. So we can superpose different such waves and construct a wave which has got some spatial information. So we can superpose waves with different momentum. So what do we have here? Here we are superposing waves, plane waves, with all possible values of momentum. But we can give different amplitudes or different weightage to different values of the momentum. So each of these e to the power minus I h cross by h cross px minus et corresponds to one value of momentum. We can superpose waves with different values of momentum, and we did not have the coefficient over here same for all the values. So the coefficients vary with the value of the momentum. So we superpose all of these different values to get a final wave function. So this is how we can go around trying to construct a wave function which has got some spatial information. Let us consider a particular case where A of p is a constant. So we have psi x t is equal to minus infinity to infinity, and we choose the constant to be 1 by square root of 2 pi. So we get e to the power minus I by h cross px minus et dp by 2 pi h cross. Now you might have encountered such an integral earlier. This integral is nothing but the Dirac delta function, delta of x. What is the Dirac delta function? The Dirac delta function is a function which has a value infinity at x equal to 0. It suddenly shoots up at x equal to 0. It has value infinity so it has a I'll plot the function. The function is 0 everywhere except for at x equal to 0. Wherever the argument of the function is 0, the function is non-zero. Elsewhere the function is 0. So in this case the function is non-zero at x equal to 0 and it is infinity at that value. Elsewhere this function is 0. So in this case what we find is that the particle is localized at x equal to 0. The particle is located at x equal to 0 because the wave function is non-zero only for x equal to 0, and the mod square of the wave function, okay, we are considering, I should have pointed out one thing earlier, we are considering the time t equal to 0. So this will not be there. It is only a function of x. Right? Many of you might have been wondering, if you had been following, why does t not appear here? Well, we were considering a time instant t equal to 0. At a fixed time, all the Fourier modes are, all the momentum values have got equal weightage, and if I superpose them, I get a delta function which looks like this. It suddenly shoots up at x equal to 0 and it is 0 elsewhere, and the probability of getting the particle at some point x is, in this case, del square x, which is infinity for x equal to 0, and it is 0 for x not equal to 0. This is the Dirac delta function. So this corresponds to a particle localized at x equal to 0. So now we know where the particle is, but do we have any idea about the momentum of the particle? So the question arises, do we know anything about the momentum of the particle? Now in this case, the wave function psi, which is a Dirac delta function, is made up of waves with all possible momentum. So we have absolutely no information about the momentum of the particle. Yes?
How can probability be infinity?
The probability density is infinity. But to calculate the probability, you have to integrate the probability density over dx, and that interval dx is an infinitesimal. So the product can be finite. Okay, so the product is finite always, but the probability density itself can be infinite. But I agree with you that this is not a desirable kind of wave function, and we shall not be dealing with either this or this as our typical wave function. We shall be mostly dealing with general superpositions of such functions to construct well-behaved wave functions which are not infinite. They will be finite. We shall consider this in later classes as we go on. So let me now briefly recapitulate this. We had one function where the momentum was very well known. It was p and e, but we had no position information. We constructed another wave function psi, which is a superposition of all wave functions, plane waves with different all possible momenta, and we get a wave function which has no momentum information, but we know the position of the particle precisely. In general, we shall be dealing with wave functions which are superpositions of different wave functions with different momenta, but the different values of the different waves with different momenta will not get equal weightage. So the function a of p will in general not be a constant, and we shall use this to construct well-defined and well-behaved wave functions which do not blow up at any point. Now if you are familiar with Fourier transforms, you will notice that this expression, the relation between psi and the plane wave with a fixed momentum, is nothing but a Fourier expansion of this. So the coefficients of the waves with different momentum a of p is nothing but the Fourier transform of this wave function. And we can also invert this and at the time t equal to 0, we can write a p is equal to minus infinity to infinity psi x 0 e to the power I by h cross p x minus e t dx by square root of 2 pi at t equal to 0. So, this term will not be there, right. Now, it is also clear why we had introduced a factor of 1 by square root of 2 pi over here. It was just to make the two expressions, the relation between psi and a, symmetric. So, we have a factor of 1 by square root of 2 pi here as well as over here. The h cross in this expression appears because of the h cross over here, and we can go back and forth between the two descriptions. Okay. Now, so what have we learned in this exercise? We find that if you have momentum information, it is at the cost of position information. If you have position information, it is at the cost of momentum information. So, there is some kind of a relation between the two, and this is the uncertainty relation. The uncertainty relation roughly says that the uncertainty in the position and the uncertainty in the momentum, the product of these two, is of the order of h cross or larger. So, it could be either larger or of the order of h cross. I will make this more rigorous in later classes. Right now, at the qualitative level, we can use this expression. So, if you make the delta x very small, that is, you have got full position information, in the Dirac function, case, delta x is 0 because we know that the particle is at the origin. Then you have delta p infinite. If this is 0 and this is finite, then this has to be infinite. So, we have absolutely no momentum information. On the other hand, if you fix the value of momentum, so delta p is 0, you have got full momentum information, but absolutely no, then you find that you have absolutely no position information. Delta x becomes infinity. This is the uncertainty relation. So, we shall be dealing with this and discuss this in more detail in the next lecture. I will stop here for today.